Therapy Flow community, welcome back to another growth opportunity for your private practice.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, we're going to be diving into, I think, a really important concept that can really dramatically shape and change your perspective on your business right now. One of the funny things that we've seen happen in our own businesses and often inside of private practices that we work with is that they stall out right after some growth occurred, meaning the practice owner took some actions or the revenue grew or the team grew or something like that happens, and then the business almost gets stuck in its new place and its new capacity. And there's a couple big reasons for this. I was reflecting upon my almost 3-year-old now the other day, and the fact that all of the toys that he has been playing with for the last 6 months that have been great and wonderful and engaging, he's slowly playing with less and less of them because his developmental needs are changing as he grows. And the same thing is true for your business. As your business grows, your developmental needs for your systems, your mindset, your staff training, your processes across the board slowly shift and change. And if we don't bring in new things, if we don't bring in new toys, new operating procedures, new whatever, you won't continue to sustain the growth and meet the needs of your business. So we're going to be unpacking that today, sharing some process, sharing some tips. And this is going to be especially important if you're in growth mode for your practice or you're stuck, right? And we're going to be sharing some concepts throughout this to make that happen. So without, going too deep into it yet, let's talk a little bit about the mindset and systems piece that break when you are consistently growing through private practice.
Yeah, so I think growth means you're like taking actions, right? And something is moving in a direction that you're intending it to move in, right? And so in order for any like movement to happen, I think you need to one have this idea that something can move, right? So you need to have this idea, this mindset shift that you can grow and that growth can happen. And so the other thing to note here is when you're taking actions and you're doing things, it's kind of exhausting. And so there's a lot of like action and energy that's involved in growth and change in movements. And so I think it's interesting to kind of take note of like where you're at. So if you're in growth mode, it's like, well, we probably just had a mindset shift. We probably just or are currently adding in a lot of action and energy into our business. And maybe it's exhausting and maybe it's like a flurry, maybe it's a whirlwind, like there's a lot that's happening or has happened in order for you to be sort of on this trajectory. And so I think where I kind of want to like dip my toes in here a little bit is like because there's so much energy and because there's so much like mental strain and so much uh maybe like new is the way to look at it, overwhelm, uncertainty, fear, craziness that's happening because you don't know if it's actually going to work out. I think there's a lot of like levels of kind of exhaustion that can kind of appear, and I think that that's where so many get stuck. Is there's
Yeah.
like a stamina gap,
Wow.
and so I think I maybe took
No, no, no.
where
I think ending on that stamina gap piece, I think we can go a little bit deeper on that because I have felt that. I have felt that stamina gap sometimes of we just did that. I just reached out to all of those people. We just overhauled the website. We just trained our team on this. Like, how am I supposed to do more just to get this business to grow, just to get this business into profit, just to and that stamina, right, is on the flip side of after taking massive action typically. And so, right, where do you head, where do you go from here? I think of a couple notes as we dip into this is number one, have you closed the loop? What I mean by that is, have you slowed down and acknowledged all of the work that you just did, and sort of like closed the loop on it and said, yes, that was good work, we're done, this is the outcome, this is the process. And you said, great, that event or that series of events, the actions were taken, now we get to look at the result, yay or nay. Are we closing the loops daily, weekly, monthly, yearly in our business. So that way we can prepare essentially the next day or the next week.
Yeah, I kind of think of it like you're rolling a big snowball up a hill and you don't know how big the hill is. And as you keep rolling the snowball up this hill, it's collecting more and more snow and it's getting bigger and bigger and heavier and heavier. And you just don't know when the top of the hill is, so that it just like rolls down by itself. And so I like with this visual in my head, it's like we're pushing up this hill. Sometimes things are so sometimes we're walking to the left and we're working in circles, and sometimes we're walking to the other way and and so sometimes there's a lot of uncertainty or risk sort of in the things that we're doing. But eventually, if you just kind of keep walking and maybe with a little bit of guidance, you finally get to the sort of top of the hill, and then it kind of gets pushed over the hill. And that's
Yeah.
kind of like your plateau point, where you no longer maybe need to put in like different actions or change your mindset or change different elements to kind of sort of be at the top of this hill, right?
And I think a large part of it is when you have clarity on the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Hey, I'm trying to hit this revenue level or this many clinicians or this financial outcome or this level of separation from my business. Giving yourself permission that in some ways, whatever changes, mindset, emotional, physical, systems to be built, just giving yourself permission that you are going to build something that's probably, or you're going to have a mental, emotional shift that will also need to be grown or outgrown at a later time. That's appropriate. And that's okay because everything happens in stages inside of a business, and you can't be at 10 right away because otherwise you'd be at 10. So we need to stop at 4 for a little bit so we can get to 5 and then get to 7. And sometimes we can skip rungs sort of on the ladder, so to speak, but we have to be okay with kind of going one rung at a time. And if we need to sort of quote unquote taking breaks in between before we say, yes, great, now it's time for the next rung.
Yeah, I love that. I, I I'm gonna I like all of our analogies right now. So I'm gonna feed us one more, and then maybe we can get like more tactical on some of the
Yeah.
things. I I was I think everyone actually has read like maybe like a fairy tale or something where there's like maybe like a dragon that's like guarding its gold, right? And in order for the
Yeah.
hero for the story to get the pile of gold, they got to fight this dragon, right? And so I think it's really important to know, as we're looking at growth and as we're looking at stalling, that oftentimes if you're looking for that pile of gold, you probably just have to like go out and fight that dragon, right?
Hmm.
And there's like the obstacle that's in your way that's either stopping you, or it's the obstacle that's in your way that's going to end your journey. And so in some ways, if you go out and find a way to overcome that dragon that's there, um, you overcome that obstacle, what's going to end up happening is you'll find that gold. Or
Yeah.
or if you're like, hey, I don't want to go fight that dragon, I think I'm okay where I'm at, maybe like outside of the cave, or maybe I fought one or two dragons and I'm okay with what I've got right now. uh, in a lot of ways, that's kind of like where you're going to be stuck at.
Yeah.
And so to maybe be extra explicit about that, your dragons are going to be those obstacles that you're facing, or those things that you're saying, I don't want to do that, or maybe it's not worth my time right now, or whatever it is. Those are your dragons, right? Those are the things that are stopping you, holding you back, uh, you know making it so that you're sort of capped within your area. And then and sometimes it's okay to just be like, it's okay, I don't want to go fight those other dragons, right? So
Yeah.
but it's all on the other side of like an obstacle of some sort. I thought that was just weird.
As we transition to talking about like systems that break during growth, I just think of a story that comes to mind of a practice owner out of Florida that we've been working with this year. They came to us and they had 6 clinicians on staff, and they were really stable. They were kind of at capacity. They were almost experiencing as much profit or as much, revenue as they could for their current team size, their current capacity. And they were like, we want to grow. And digging into the process, it was really the mindset shift of how many, how often, and how fast that they needed to hire and recruit additional counselors to their team that needed to be shifted. What actually needed to shift is to for them to be okay with a different speed. Some people are okay and comfortable going 30 miles an hour, right? Some are comfortable and okay going 60 miles an hour. To translate that, some practice owners are okay with hiring 1 to 3 new clinicians a year. And for them, they were like, we want to see this outcome. The cost of that was them saying, oh, we have to be comfortable with hiring like 10 new counselors in the next 6 months if we're going to reach these other goals that we wanted. And it was that simple, like build out mechanism on a mindset and emotional level that kind of turned the light on and opened the doors. They essentially went and hired 10 new counselors, moved into a new space, and in about a 5 or 6 month time frame, they doubled their revenue, continued to grow. But the root of that wasn't as much the nuts and bolts of like, how did they hire some of those things? It was they needed to give themselves permission that hiring, onboarding, and doing quality control for that type of speed was appropriate for them, and they were going to be okay with going at that volume. So let's talk a little bit about the systems end of thing. I think this is just a really nuts and bolts place. As an example, when you first start out as a solo practice or maybe even a new group practice, tracking inquiries coming in on a spreadsheet, or maybe not tracking them all, or even knowing where you're getting your inquiries from, is kind of totally okay and totally fine. But we see often there comes a point where you need more information, you need data. And I think that's the biggest category is as you continue to grow, and we've experienced this a lot, you need better and deeper insights to the micro and macro numbers in your business. And it's going to be really hard to grow or sustain the growth that you already had unless you have systems and rhythms to dig into those numbers.
Yeah. I think of a couple elements here. One is going to be your EMR, right? So there's some data points here inside of the electronic medical record. Some are a little bit more sophisticated and some are a little less sophisticated. Um, I I think right now in the current state of things, simple practice seems to be the one that gets you the most information, bang for the buck kind of elements, and there's some really cool templates and automations in there that help you out here with some of the systems maybe as you're growing too. And so I think of simple practice off the top of my head when it comes to data on a client side of things. I also think of a client relationship manager for sales, marketing, that kind of management, and then there's going to be some layer of data like a spreadsheet maybe that you guys are
Yeah.
building to help with some of those other things.
Yeah, I think just nuances of, at some point there are deeper numbers that you have to like how often, what's the churn rate on session 1 to session 2? Can we look at that per clinician? So there are just nuanced numbers as you continue to grow that you have to say, "Hey, these micro numbers actually become really important because they now affect the 20 therapists or the 40 therapists or the 70 therapists that are on my staff. So if we improve this by a percent, large or small percent, it makes a big difference across the board." And so that's kind of the journey is we really have to focus on macro numbers in the early stages. And once it's up to speed, micro numbers are the things that are going to affect a lot. So depending on where you are, right? If you're sub 7 figures, if you're sub multi 7 figures, right? There's going to be a different level of specificity of data that you need to pull out, and then different rhythms. I think the same goes for like financial rhythms of like, well, how much do I actually care about tax write-offs? How much do I actually care about how much I'm spending for and on my therapist? There are things that you outgrow pretty quickly and will break if you try and grow any more if you don't have new or better rhythms in place to audit that going forward.
I'll give just a really quick example because I think that the like tax and financial example is really interesting here. Um, you stand to gain significantly more later in your financial journey in private practice when you're looking at taxes and finances. And so I think of like the practice that's making like $3 to $10 million a year. They stand to gain a significant amount if they're looking at taxes and finances like closely. And then I think of the practices that are making like less than six figures annually. And guys, it takes the same amount of time to look at and work on and acquire information around taxes, finances, and other things for your business. However, the practice owner that's running the sub six figure business stands to gain very little compared to like the $3 or $10 million practice. And
Yeah.
so the time and energy that you're spending on something here to grow, right? It might be a perceived growth mechanism, but really maybe it's not that big of a growth mechanism. And so I love this idea of like look at the big data points, like the big broad strokes when you're small, and then start getting really like tight and into the little details as you kind of grow. And I think it's really important to have the head on your shoulders to look at the perspective that you're looking from and the relativeness for your journey.
Yeah. I think the last big piece that has to be leveled up or breaks as you grow is with your team and with delegation. A team of one, a team of three, a team of 10 functions very different. What you mentally and emotionally can personally handle and manage will just break at a certain point. And typically we see that at right around the 7 to 12 clinician mark, depending on your personal aptitude. And then from there, every usually like 5 to 10 additional clinicians that you stack on top of that continues to be moments where the business really like breaks because you got to a certain size and we have to reconfigure how we communicate with our staff, what we communicate, how we train, some of those things. When it's a team of three, right, when it was just me and Attilio before we hired any team members, I was on a call with them every day doing different stuff. Our communication was incredibly fluid, right? Okay, now our team grew, we do different things. I'm talking to him 3 times a week. Now I'm talking to him 1 time a week, right? Or whatever it is in your business as you talk to your team members doing therapy sessions. So team meetings and what you cover in team meetings, that's going to look different for a team of 5 than it is for a team of 12. And if we aren't cognizant of like when those transitions change, we're going to miss the inclusion of important things. People are going to be able to see very like included and feel like their voice is heard when you have a team of 4 or a team of 5. When you have a team of 40, we have to work way harder and set up more consistent structures to make sure that people have the ability to communicate and get their needs met as team members and feel included in the business and attached to it. So just be cognitive of the fact that when you grow, your team breaks because size breaks the typical rhythms and culture that's happening. And I'll add one last note to it before Tilio jumps in here. I was reading something the other day that made a lot of sense on a culture level. If you essentially double your team size a certain fast period of time, right? You go 2 to 4. Well, now those 2 new people or those 3 new people that are brand new to the business are now more representative of whatever culture they're bringing in than what was there beforehand. Meaning, if there's a team of 2 and you hire 3 more people in the next couple months, well, you have a lot of work to do to bring them and constitute culture and rhythms because there's a ratio that doesn't work. Versus if you have a team of 40 and you hire 1 new person, well, they're just kind of a part of the structure that already exists. But if you have a team of 15 and you go from 15 to 30 in 12 months, right, you have a lot of work to do. So you have to keep whatever your growth venue in mind and know the ratio of how are we onboarding these people? How are we teaching them the culture? What matters? What digs in? Because that's going to break, especially if you're going quickly.
Yeah, I think my only note here on team elements um, is like, what does the actual system look and feel like? And I think in private practice, sometimes we can either massively oversimplify it or undersimplify maybe, and then I think sometimes we way overcomplicate it. And I like to just kind of look at what is the basic that the business has to do, And the basics that the business has to do here is bring in new clients, right? We need to have conversations for new clients, and we need to book them with therapists. And then therapists need to see their clients with some frequency that ends up working out profitably for the practice. And so I think of like the elements and the pieces that go in here. And what I'd encourage you guys is don't overcomplicate it and don't undercomplicate it. I think some of the elements and some of the pitfalls that I see on team is hiring like friends and family for positions. I see that too frequently, and it ends up becoming more of a problem than more of a harmful event than a helpful event sometimes, if you don't know what you're doing. And then other times I see is like someone just landed in my lap. Like I think of the therapist or therapists that just landed in the lap, and then all of a sudden we've got this like group, and sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's absolutely at the wrong time. And so I'd encourage you guys to look at the timing of events, and I'd encourage you guys to look at how simple is my system. Am I making it complex, or am I making it too simple where we're dropping balls and we're missing pieces? Um, as you're growing, the vision of the leader, the mission for the leader is what's going to put things in perspective, and it's what's going to clarify things for your team. If you feel like your team is not clear, that is a reflection of you. That is a
Yeah.
reflection of your communication skills, and that is a reflection of the standards that you have set as the leader. And so I'd encourage you guys at this time of maybe growth or maybe of stalling, look at how are you the leader communicating and creating clarity for your team members, so that they can make good decisions without you, so that they can bring things to your attention when it actually means something instead of when it doesn't mean anything. And then how are you as a leader involved in setting sort of the stage for your practice? So how clear are you on what you have to do?
Yeah. I'll end us today with two questions. One riffing on what Attilio just said. Are you prone to overcomplicate things that are actually simple, or are you prone to simplify things that are actually kind of complicated? And just be cognitive of your bent one way or another. I think for me, I typically overcomplicate things that are pretty simple. And with that awareness, I can just slow down and ask myself, hey, am I overcomplicating this? Is there a simpler way to think through this, get this done, or to make sure an action happens here? What's the minimum viable action I can actually do? Okay, great. Let me start there, do that, like make it more complex later on. And that's for me. And then the last question that I would end on, just for some feedback, is what have you recently done well but outgrown? Do you feel tension around how you communicate with your team, or how you track your referrals, or how your systems work, or how you make financial decisions? Look at places that you feel like your developmental business needs are not being met anymore, right? I hate to say it, but maybe a website you built 2 years ago, right, is no longer serving your needs. That happens. Maybe it's the financial modeling of things. Maybe it's your space physically. Maybe it's something else. What have you outgrown that you need to developmentally go to the next rung to make sure your business needs are being met? And if you can answer that question and meet your needs, your business will continue to grow.
I want to add just one caveat to that, because he said something really intelligent, and it was just the difference of one word. Guys, what's the thing that you need, not the thing that you want? And I think that that's my last clarifying point, because I think sometimes we want something and it's not actually what we need. And so I just hope that we can dig in extra in this maybe high pressure moment, high pressure time in growth or in staticness, and maybe you want something else that's not happening. And you can look a little critically on that as you're kind of going through those questions.
100%. And sometimes we don't know what we need. It's a great indication that what you need then is to get help from a coach, from a mentor, from a peer, from an outside perspective. And we're here for that as well. Hope you guys have a good Thursday.